Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We are the Group 8, and we will continue discussing about the literary theories and modern criticism of school of thoughts. But first, we will have a little recap about our last topic, which we discussed about the structuralism. So, structuralism focuses on underlying structures and relationships, shaping human behavior, language, and culture. Reaction against existentialism emphasizes on individual freedom and subjectivity. The core principles of structuralism is that meaning arises from relationship between elements, not individual elements. For example, the signifier is a word form and the signified is the concept or the meaning. It creates meaning through differences. And it prioritizes patterns and relationships like as what I have told you last meeting, one of my examples is the traffic light system. Synchronic analysis is studying system at a specific moment, and applied in literary criticism analyzes text as systems of interconnected elements. Now, let's proceed to Roman Jacobson. Roman Jacobson and the poetic function. He introduced the concept of the poetic function of language, where attention is focused on the form of message itself rather than external reference. So it means that the poetic function means we focus on how the message sounds and looks, not just what it means. So, for example, in poetry, meaning is produced through patterns such as rhythm, repetition, parallel structure, and sound relationships. He argued that in poetry, every element contributes to meaning, forming an interconnected system where language draws attention to its own structure. So every part of the language matters because the form itself helps create meaning. And now, let's proceed to post structuralism, which will be discussed by our next reporter, Mr. Marvin Estrada.
All right, thank you, Micah. Am I audible, everyone?
Yes, you're
Okay.
audible.
All right, thank you. Okay, so now let's go and proceed to post-structuralism. First, it was the during 1960s and 1970s, scholars began questioning the assumption of structuralism. So from the post-structuralism, they start arguing regarding the structuralism. So they mentioned that like the post-structuralist thinks that structuralism relied too heavily on the idea that systems are stable, coherent, and analyzable. And rather than constructing a new rigid system, post-structuralism focuses on revealing the limitations and contradictions within systems of meaning. So we also have authors here or the post-structuralist, which is Jacques Derrida, Michael Foucault, Julia Kristeva, Roland Barthes. Okay. So as you can see, these are their faces. So Jack Derrida is, as you can see, it's like serious mind, and we also have here Julia. Um, yeah. So most of them is actually, or actually all of them argued about the structuralism. So key ideas of post-structuralism is like. Again, it's argued that meaning is never fixed or final. So, language constantly generates new interpretations because words gain meaning only through their relationships with other words, which are themselves unstable. Thus, meaning is always shifting. So, meaning to say it's kind of broad, that we can say that post-structuralist is saying that the meaning is not fixed, so it actually relating to other words and then post or within this or during the post-structuralism, it's not that stable, and then it's always shifting. Now, here comes the death of the author. So the death of the author, Roland Barthes famously argued that the author should not be seen as the ultimate source of meaning. So meaning to say is that even if they are the author, the reader also is the one who can at least interpret the what they call this one, the text, the meaning of the book, or the the specific phrase from the book. Like as you can see here, instead the meaning emerges through the interactions. Instead it actually emerges through the text, language, cultural context, and also the reader. So, if you, as you can see, it also depends on the argument between the language and then also the cultural context. For example, if you have a different culture, you have a different approach to the specific book or to the specific literature. So this perspective emphasizes the active role of readers in interpreting text. So meaning to say, it's up to the readers who interprets the text that is in the literature. And then also the construction. So again, just to let you know, post-structuralism is not that stable. And then here comes Jacques Derrida, one of the most influential post-structuralists, who has this method of deconstruction. So deconstruction examines how texts contain internal contradictions and tensions that undermine the apparent meanings. Okay, so rather than revealing a single truth, deconstruction shows that texts often produce multiple, okay, conflicting interpretations. So, like I mentioned earlier, um, this is actually broad because we are not like before, like the structuralism. It only like it has an ending. It has like fixed meaning or something. Now, here in the post-structuralism, so we can produce multiple and conflicting interpretations. Okay, so Derrida's concept of difference. So Derrida introduced the concept difference as a term that combines two meanings. So difference meaning arises from distinctions between words, and differential meaning is constantly postponed because each word refers to the other word. I would like to ask Mr. Sean or Irving to explain at least what the Redis concepts is would want us to know about the two concepts here, like difference and differential.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sir Marvin. So, deconstruction is not simply deconstruction, as it may say, right? It is a very careful and rigorous reading of a text in order to uncover its internal contradictions. So, what that means is it reveals how texts often undermine the very ideas that they claim to support. So, for example, right, we have a text that promotes truth. This text that promotes the truth may simultaneously reveal uncertainty. So, a text that asserts order may expose chaos underneath the surface. So, deconstruction shows us that a text does not contain a stable meaning. It is a site of tension, contradiction, and often instability. For difference, which is, I think, the main key concept that Jacques Derrida is well known for. As it says, meaning arises through difference between words, and meanings always deferred or delayed. So, in other words, when we try to define a word, we rely on other words, and those words rely on more words. So, meaning is never fully present. it is always just out of reach. Thank you very
All right, that is a good insight. I really appreciate it, Irving. So that's right. Again, post or deconstruction is actually, yeah, not fixed, so it doesn't stop there. It's again, it's always shifting, and then like Irving mentioned, there is like a defer or delay when it comes to deconstruction. Okay. All right. So now the concept of the trace. We have here the example. So just to let you know, in these the trace introduced by Derrida and suggests that every word carries the absence of the other words it differs from. So, example here, when we understand the word light, its meaning implicitly references what is not, such as darkness. Okay, so as you can see on this example, meaning uh, by what is absent as well as what is present. So the light itself, if you see light, there is a dark there is like absence of the darkness. Same thing, if there is a darkness, then there is like absence of the light. Okay. All right, so now let's proceed on this the differences between structuralism and post-structuralism. Okay, so again, structuralism, the meaning is stable, structured, and then for the post-structuralism, the meaning is unstable and constantly shifting. Also, language is is a structured system. For post-structuralism, language is inherently ambiguous. Okay, and again, for the structuralism, text contain underlying patterns that can be analyzed. Take note. For the structuralism, it can be analyzed easily to analyze because it has a underlying patterns. But for the post-structuralism, the text contain contradictions that resist final interpretations. Okay, and then focus on systems and structures for structuralism. However, for post-structuralism, it focuses on stability, instability, and interpretations. Okay, so lastly, meaning can be explained through structural relationships for the structuralism, and meaning is endlessly deferred for post-structuralism. Okay, so yeah, let's proceed on this significance in literary criticism. All right. So again, both structuralism and post-structuralism greatly influenced modern literary studies, and also structuralism provided systematic tools for analyzing texts, emphasizing patterns, codes, and structures in literature. And for the post-structuralism, expanded this discussion by highlighting the limitations of structured analysis, emphasizing ambiguity, reader interpretation, and the instability of the language. Together, this approach has shifted literary criticism away from traditional methods that focus solely on author intention, historical context, moral interpretation. Instead, they encourage scholars to explore how language itself produced meaning. Okay, so any question? So I just want to at least again have Mr. Irving to at least give us the
much.
insight about structuralism and then the post-structuralism. Just a short one.
Thank you. So yeah, the differences mainly between post-structuralism and structuralism are that the stability and
Mm.
instability, right? When we look at Michael Foucault or Roland Barthes, let's look at Roland Barthes. He famously declared the death of the author, right? Now, it does not mean that the author literally dies, but that the author's intention should no longer control the meaning of a text. Instead, meaning is created by the reader. So if you look at structuralism, there are authors there. I think his name was Ferdinand, one of them, wherein most of the authors there believe that it is the author that creates meaning. Right? There is stability. There's sureness in it. While in post-structuralism, everything is subject to change and interpretation. Right? So you have in post-structuralism other key thinkers such as Jacques Lacan, right, where he argues that the unconscious is structured like language, which makes identity fragmented and unstable. We have Julia Kristeva, who introduces intertextuality, where all texts are interconnected. Jean Baudrillard, who presents hyperreality, right, simulacrum, where simulation replaces reality, and Gilles Deleuze and Felix Guattari, if I remember, who proposes that rhizome, which is a model of thinking where meaning is nonlinear and ever expanding. So there's a lot of differences, but the main difference for me is stability.
Thank you, Irving, for that. So, yeah, so don't forget the death of the author regarding on that. Okay, because death of the author, meaning to say, it's not all about the author's the message of the author itself, but it also depends on the reader. And again, it's always shifting in post-structuralism. Okay, now let's proceed with the new historicism and cultural materialism.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. So let's do that to transition now. If post-structuralism destabilizes language, we have to ask, what happens when we apply this instability to history itself? That leads us directly into new historicism, which is the crisis of history. So, if post structuralism is the crisis of meaning, then new historicism is the crisis of history. So, new historicism emerges in the 1980s, primarily through the works of Stephen Greenblatt. It applies post structuralist insights to literature and history. At its core, new historicism argues that literature cannot be separated from the historical culture or cultural conditions in which it was produced, right? More importantly, history itself is not objective. It is constructed and interpreted and shaped by power. So, if you read it here, New Historicism developed in the United States and was influenced by Michael Foucault. So, Michael Foucault was one of the big contributors, but not the main backbone or founder. While cultural materialism, which was developed in the UK and is influenced by Marxist cultural theory, both emphasize that literature should be understood within its historical and social context. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide, please. Okay, yes. So, as you can see, the term itself was popularized by Stephen Greenblatt. New historicism developed partly as a reaction against new criticism, a dominant literary approach in the mid 20th century, criticism that emphasized close reading and the autonomy of text, which treats literature as independent from historical and social influences. If you guys would like to read the whole PowerPoint slide, that would be fine. But my insights here would be that for Stephen Greenblatt, the idea that he introduced is cultural poetics, which suggests that literature is not merely a reflection of society, it actively participates in shaping cultural meaning and power. So, in works like Renaissance, Self Fashioning, and Shakespearean Negotiations, which are works of Greenblatt, he demonstrates how literature is embedded within the systems of politics, religion, and often social hierarchy. So, can we move on to the next slide, please? So, the core principles of new historicism, right? Um, the interdependence of literature and history. One of the central assumptions of new historicism is that literature and history are mutually constitutive. What does that mean? It means that literary texts both shape and are shaped by the historical conditions in which they are produced. Right? So history itself is constructed through narratives, documents, and interpretation. So as a result, Historical texts and literary texts are equally as important cultural artifacts that reflect the ideology and social tensions of a particular historical moment. So, these are the core principles of New Historicism, which is mainly just mutually constitutive. So, it is shaped by what we are and the historical conditions in which they were produced. Okay. So, next slide, please. I think this next slide will be tackled by Sir or Miss Gabrielle.
All right. Thank you for that introduction, Mr. Tyler. So now we are going to discuss about the power discourse in social institutions. To start with, we have here the power in shaping cultural production, which is influenced by Foucault, actually created in our or influence in our society, or it may actually question certain practices and authority and on how the church practices their authority within the people. So because of these connections, literature becomes a part of a bigger conversation about power in society, where it actually help us understand how society works and how power influences people. So let us move on to our next slides. So now, new historicists focus on two connected ideas. First is the textuality of history, which refers to the idea that history itself is constructed through written narratives and interpretation rather than representing an objective of records or events. This means that history is not actually purely objective or 100% factual. Instead, it was actually written by people, it was also told by narratives, and it was actually influenced by the interpretation of individuals. So, in simple terms, history cannot actually be shaped or even biased depending on who tells it or who wrote it. Secondly, is the historicity of text. This suggests that literary works are products of specific historical circumstances and cannot be separated from the cultural conditions in which they were produced. This simply means that literary works are influenced by the time period in which they were written, wherein a story actually reflects the culture, beliefs, or events events that was actually happening during that time. So it cannot actually separated from its historical background. So together, these ideas challenges the belief that history is purely factual and literature is purely imaginative. Instead, both are shaped by culture, society, and human perspective. Do we guys get it? I believe so. So, proceeding to our next slide, which is the circulation of social energy, which is actually introduced by Stephen Greenblatt. This just simply means that literature and society affect each other, wherein every time period has its own feelings, beliefs, and issues, just like fear, excitement, or ideas about power. Writers actually pick up these ideas and include them in their stories, poems, or plays that they are actually writing. So when people read those works, they are starting to think or question which can influence the society again. In this sense, literature functions as a medium to which cultural meanings are negotiated, contested, and transformed. But new historicists believe that to really understand a specific story, you also need to look at everyday documents from that time. So they treat a play and a simple grocery sorry for that. It So they treat a play and a simple grocery release as equal important because both show how people lived and thought. They actually New historicist critics often analyzes literary texts alongside non-literary historical documents such as legal records. This is where people get punished for. And for diaries, this is what people felt and experienced daily. I believe so that when back then, when we are in our elementary days, we have our own diaries wherein we are actually writing our own feelings or what we have experienced in that day. Next is the government documents. This is where the rules and laws were written. Next is the religious writings. This is what people feared or values, just like the Ten Commandments. And the economic reports, wherein this is yes. So proceeding,
Yeah.
why do the new historicists do this thing? Because a story doesn't actually exist alone. It is a part of a bigger picture of history and culture. So, in simplest term, to understand a book, you need to see it as one small piece of a big puzzle made of many different stories and records. Because just like what I have said earlier, the literature is actually made of what the society is, and it is actually made of the perspective of the writer, the feeling of the writer on the society. N- Um, I think Mr. Tyler would like to add something.
Yeah, it was only on the economic reports. So for the economic reports, it was the tax. It was also the tax declarations, um, the country's economic reports given from the government. So for the religious writing naman, those were not just the yun nga, as you said, like the Ten Commandments. It was the biblical implications. Most of the laws that were created back then were taken from the Bible itself. Be it I think it was the oldest Bible, which is the Gutenberg Bible, and then there were also the Dead Sea Scrolls. So there were multiple religious writings that new historicists love to criticize. Right? Government documents such as I don't think the government documents, if I remember my research, it was also related to court documents as well. So testimonies, trials, and the likes, diaries from authors, from people, from numerous people, especially people in power, because many people back then had their own diaries, the counts, the duchess, the dukes, and such, and the legal records. So yung mga court documents. So those are mostly it. That's just the extra information I wanted.
Thank you for that, Mr. Tyler. I think we are now going to proceed to other topics, which is the cultural materialism that was going to be reported by Miss Shij.
Okay, so what's under cultural materialism? Cultural materialism developed in Britain during 1980s. It was influenced by Marxist cultural theory, which studies how class or social class, economics, and power affects culture and literature. This approach was also shaped by the ideas of Raymond Williams, who believed that culture and literature are closely connected to real social and historical conditions. Now we have the following key figures associated with cultural materialism, including J. Raymond Williams. Raymond William is considered one of the founder of cultural materialism. He emphasized that culture closely connected to social, political, and economic conditions. He also believed that literature and cultural works reflect the everyday experience and struggle of people in society. Proceeding to the next slide, Dolimer. Jonathan developed cultural materialism further by analyzing literature in relation of power, ideology, and social conflicts. His work often focuses on how literature texts challenge dominant beliefs and reveal hidden tension in society. For Alan Sinfield, he contributed to cultural materialism by examining how literature interacts with um, political and cultural institutions. He also explored how texts can both support and question dominant ideologies, particularly in relation to issues like power, class, and identity. So, to sum it up, these scholars argued that literature should be studied not only as cultural artifacts, but also as a part of the broader and material and ideological struggle within the society. For the next slide, please. Core principle of cultural materialism. So, first, what is ideology? Ideology refers to the system of beliefs and values that support and justify social powers structures. Um, Cultural materialists analyze how literary texts may either reinforce or challenge dominant ideological system. So we have here an example. Literature may reflect ideological related to. First is class privilege. What's under class privilege? Class privilege is I'm sorry for that. Class privilege literature may show how wealthy or upper class characters may have opportunities, power, or respect compared to poorer characters. This reflects the beliefs that social class affects a person's status and influence in society. For the gender inequality, many literary works portray differences in how men and women are treated. For example, female characters may be limited to certain roles or denied opportunities, reflecting societal beliefs about gender roles and inequality. Colonial power. Some texts shows how colonialization nations control or dominate other countries and culture. These works may portray to the superiority claimed by colon, colonizer or reveal the oppression experienced by colonialized people. Next is political authority. Literature can depict how government or leaders exercise power over citizens. Stories may support authority or question it by showing corruption, control, or resistance among the people. So, by it, this examining ideological structure, cultural materialism reveals how literature participates in broader social conflicts. Proceeding to the next slide. Material conditions and social structures. So, cultural materialism therefore examines how literature relates to real world structures such as economic inequality, political governance, labor relations, social hierarchies. First is let's focus on economic inequality. Economic inequality may show the gap between the rich and the poor and how unequal access to wealth and resources affects people's lives. For political governance, text often portrays system, government, and authority, showing how leaders and political powers influence society. For labor relations, um, literature can reflect the relationship between workers and employers, including issues like exploitation, working conditions, and class conflict. For social hierarchies, many literary works present social ranking based on class, race, gender, or status, showing how people and privilege are organized in society. This perspective highlights the way in which literature reflects and engages with material realities rather than purely abstract ideas. For the next slide. Okay, thank you. So, under political commitment and criticism, we have here the approaches frequently emphasizes marginalized perspectives, including those related to working class experience, feminist criticism, post-colonial theory, minority identities. So, what are these perspectives? First, let's study working class experience. Cultural materialists examine how literature represents the lives, struggle, and conditions of working class people, highlighting issues such as poverty, labor, and social inequality. For the feminist criticism, these perspectives analyze how literature portrays women and gender roles. It explores issues such as gender inequality, discrimination, and the um, representation of women in the society. Or the next is post colonial theory. Cultural materialism also study how literature reflects the effects of colonialism, including power, domination, and the um, experiences of colonialized societies. For minority identities, literature is analyzed to understand how minority groups, such as ethnic or cultural minorities, are represented and and how their identities and experiences are expressed in text. Next is for the we have here the reinterpretation of colonial text. Sorry for the miss. Mhm. So, cultural materialism frequently revisits canonical literary works, particularly those from influential periods such as Renaissance, in order to uncover hidden ideological tension. For example, Shakespeare plays are often analyzed to reveal how they reflect conflicts involving political authority, social hierarchy, national identity. So by this, let's further explain what's under political authority. Political authority. Shakespeare plays frequently portray kings, rulers, and struggles of power. These works how these works show how authority is gained, maintained, or challenged in society. For social hierarchy, many of his plays depict clear social rankings, such as the differences between nobles, commoners, and servants, revealing how social class influence relationships and power. For national identity, we have here the some of the Shakespeare historical and political plays explore ideas about nation, leadership, and unity, reflecting how people during that time understood the country and its identity. So, rather than treating this work as timeless masterpieces, cultural materialists examine how they engage with the political and cultural struggle of their time. Next slide. Sorry for the Wednesday should be new criticism and the Friday should be cultural materialism. So what's under this? To sum it up, new historicism and cultural materialism both study literature in relation to history and society, but they differ in focus. For new historicism, influenced by Michael Foucault, focuses on discourse, power relations, and how history is constructed. It is often taken as a descriptive and analytical approach. For cultural materialism, influenced by Raymond Williams, it focuses on ideology, class, material condition, and is more openly political and critical of social inequality. So overall, both connect literature to history, but cultural materialism is more direct in criticizing system of power and inequality. Next. So what is the significance in literary studies? New historicism and cultural materialism significantly reshape literary criticism by challenging the idea that literature should be analyzed in isolation. Instead, they show that literary works are connected to culture, history, and society, meaning they reflect and shape social values, political issues, and ideological conflicts. These approaches also emphasize that literature is influenced by power relations and historical conditions. So, text should be understood as part of a larger system of social and cultural forces rather than just what do you call them, individual artistic creations. So to conclude it, um, in conclusion, new historicism and cultural materialism represents two major approaches that integrate literary analysis with historical and cultural studies. For new historicism, it focuses on the relationships between nature, and the discourses of power circulating within particular historical moments. While cultural materialism emphasizes the role of ecology and material condition in shaping cultural production. Although their methodologies differ, both theories highlight the importance of examining literature within historical, political, and cultural context, revealing how literary texts participate in the ongoing negotiation of power, meaning, and social identity. Thank you. So that's all for the report of Group 8.
All right, thank you so much. Is anyone wants to summarize our topic? No one?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think Mr. Irving wants to give us an insight about our topic tonight.
So yeah, for our topics tonight, we finished up on structuralism by Ms. Micah Everett, which talked about the stability and structure of how to read and criticize literary works. Then we talked about post-structuralism and cultural materialism. So for the cultural materialism and new historicism, post-structuralism really just dismantles the illusion of stable meaning. So it reveals language as fluid and interpretive. Um, and building upon this, new historicism extends that instability into the realm of history. So it demonstrates that both texts and historical narratives are products of cultural forces and power relations. So um, ultimately, these theories compel us to reconsider not only how we read literature, but how we understand reality itself. Um, for if meaning is never fixed and history is never neutral, um, then interpretation becomes not just an academic exercise, but a powerful act of questioning the world around us. Right? And finally, Miss CJ talked about cultural materialism in great detail. Miss CJ, do you have anything to add for cultural materialism, or would you like me to summarize it instead?
I think you better sum it up.
Okay. So to conclude it, let's recognize that it is a critical approach that closely parallels new historicism, but it remains distinct in its explicitly political stance. Okay? So while new historicism examines how power circulates within culture, cultural materialism goes further by actively questioning and challenging those power structures. So, as mentioned, thinkers such as Jonathan Dollimore and Alan Sinfield, cultural materialism emphasizes that literature is not just shaped by ideology, right? But that it can also be used as a tool to resist and subvert dominant cultural systems. So, at its core, it asserts that literature is deeply embedded in material conditions, such as class, economics, and institutional power, and must be analyzed with the goal of exposing inequality and enabling social change. So, if post structuralism destabilizes meaning and new historicism contextualizes it within history, then cultural materialism activates it. It transforms literary analysis into a form of critique that is not only intellectual, but also political and socially conscious. So, in this way, literature becomes more than just reflection, but it also becomes resistance. So thank you very much, everyone.
All right, so I think that ends our discussion. So thank you for your time and effort to, of course, listen to our reporting from Group A. So yeah, thank you so much, and you have a great day. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Let's go.
Bye, y'all!